Hey guys, how are we doing today? This is Group Three's final solution proposal. I'm Daniel Randolph. I'm kicking it off for you guys today. And to start, I want to try something. It may not be as effective over video than would be presenting live in person, but we'll try it out. I want you guys to take a moment real quick and think about the very first time you're introduced to marijuana. More so the idea of it and not actually doing it, but more so how you're introduced to, what marijuana was. So, I mean, think about, was it through maybe the DARE program, elementary schools used to run? Was it in television, in like TV shows in the classic, like the parents yell at their kids for using marijuana and how dangerous and irresponsible it is to be doing it? Was it maybe in the news when they talked about the dangers of it and how to be taken out the streets and how much of a epidemic it was of people smoking marijuana? No matter how and where you introduced to it, odds are your experiences were probably pretty similar to mine and my fellow partners, where marijuana was portrayed with a very negative view of it at first. I mean, the DARE program preached, resistance to drugs and, to never touch it. TV shows and news outlets pushed a very negative view of the substance and portrayed a very negative stigma around it as well. So that's what we're going to be talking about today in today's presentation is how do we create a destigmatization of marijuana using relational communication. So to recap what we went over last presentation, I know it's been a while, what about the stigmas and how do they affect the public and why it's so dangerous? So like I said, from a very young age, we were taught that marijuana is not only a bad and dangerous substance, but a hardcore drug that is on the same level as actual heavy substances such as cocaine and heroin, which actually have scientific backings of being extremely dangerous for your body. When we're talking about marijuana, we aren't taught about the facts and the research that go into it, but rather we're just told straight away, stay away from it, pledge never to touch it. It's a gateway drug. If you do marijuana, you can be doing cocaine the next day. That's what we're taught. Because the misinformation and perception, what it does is it makes the usage of it considered a deviant act. And that encompasses different and certain labels that the usage of things that are similar in our eyes don't entail. So basically what I'm saying is smoking marijuana has a different and more negative connotation than drinking alcohol. When we're younger and growing up, we're taught alcohol's for adults, but you know what? You're going to drink eventually and drink responsibly, but you'll be fine. It's perfectly normal to drink alcohol. Marijuana does not get that benefit of the doubt. It is taught, like we said, it's dangerous, it's bad for you, don't do it, it's a gateway drug. What this does is it causes marijuana users to face stress and paranoia, which may lead to them practicing avoidant tendencies to hide their usage, to not be portrayed any differently than any people drink or doing any other harmful substance. They don't want to be viewed with the negative stereotypes and connotations that marijuana users usually have. So, how can relational communication help in this aspect? Well, first off, stigmas are a communicated act between certain groups of people. In order to create a stigma and a stereotype, one person has to communicate to the other and has to keep going and going and going until a large enough group of the population believe that stigma. So what this kind of harmful communication does, it creates a certain expectation about how certain groups and people should be acting. And in stigma's case, it's usually pretty negative. So if someone doesn't act in that certain expected way, it's created a shock. It creates a shock. So in order to reverse a stigma, we have to recommunicate what is believed versus what actually is. So how that starts is communication between individual relationships can start another chain that actually takes away dismissing the misinformation beliefs and actually starts communicating actual backed up research that can destigmatize the negative connotations that we have of marijuana users. A lot of the theories we've covered in class are applicable in this situation, so I'm actually going to be turning it over now to one of my partners who's going to discuss one of the main theories we're going to be going over in our solution to destigmatize marijuana usage.
Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Jack, and for our topic, which is the stigma around marijuana, I thought that the theory from this course that is most applicable to our topic is the expectancy violations theory. Now, everybody should know what this is because we covered it in our course, but just to refresh everyone on the details, the expectancy violations theory, which is also known as EVT, focuses on how different people react to behaviors and actions that go against their own expectations and social norms. According to Burgoon in 2015, human interactions naturally follow expectations, and when these are violated, it can cause different responses from these people. So there are also two types of expectancy violations that can occur, positive and negative. So the first are positive violations, and these can occur when the outcome is better than what was expected. The second type are negative violations, and these happen when the outcome is worse than what they expected to happen. Alright, so now that everyone's a little bit more refreshed on expectancy violation theory, let me explain to you all how EVT can be seen in our topic of marijuana stigma. So, expectancy violation theory is seen in the stigma around marijuana with the education programs that are offered to kids. Anti-drug companies like DARE create a very negative image and stigma around marijuana. And if you're like me, all I saw growing up, all I saw in school about marijuana and about drugs were really bad things and really negative things about it from anti-drug companies like DARE that really only have negative things to say about marijuana. And what this does is creates there to be a pessimistic expectation about marijuana and those who use it, which leads to negative reactions from others. And we also see that anti-drug programs in schools focus mainly only on marijuana usage, when it's proven that marijuana actually is not as harmful to people as many other drugs are. And there have actually been no deaths that are directly related to marijuana usage. So, yeah, there are a lot worse other drugs and alcohol that these companies could cover, but instead they focus mainly on marijuana usage. They also fail to mention completely how there are many health benefits that can come from marijuana as well. Now, because these programs are creating such bad expectations of marijuana and of users, what this does, like I mentioned earlier, it causes many negative expectancy violations to occur.
Expectancy violation theory emphasizes on an individual perception of the interaction in a particular situation. With that being said, expectancy violation theory would be very helpful in breaking negative marijuana stigma that goes around. First of all, education and anti-drugs programs should definitely change their negative attitude and opinions on marijuana and stop sharing and teaching people from very young age everything bad about it. As Jackson's previously said, because of these programs creating bad expectations of marijuana, it causes many negative expectancy violations to occur. That leads to extremely judgmental mindset and opinion about marijuana, and most importantly, on people who use it. If these organizations change their approach towards marijuana and focus more on very harmful and dangerous drugs, or to talk with young people more about alcohol and its consequences, outcome will be better than expected. And that's the point where expectancy violation theory is seen as a solution. Also, if organizations talk more about positive things about marijuana and health benefits that we can have from it, outcome would be even bigger. In my opinion, there is no way that something that is part of the nature and picked up from the ground could be that bad for the environment as it presented. Expectancy violation theory is simple, but could be very helpful in lots of spheres, but especially in this particular situation, could be extremely helpful and beneficial and a very good fit for this issue.
Hi everyone, it's Kobe and I will be talking about our solution for the problem of the stigmatization of marijuana. So our primary solution for this problem is to present an unbiased education for grade school students. When considering the curriculum now in America, typically programs such as DARE, as we mentioned, are used. But this program is based in abstinence, and an abstinence-based education is detrimental towards these students, all according to Butters 2009, because this teaching style typically involves demonizing marijuana or other drugs, and its users, you know, they call them losers or lazy or forgetful, and they always focus on the detriments. However, sometimes students already partake in these drugs, or they're already influenced by these drugs, or like around these drugs. So that will have a detrimental effect on their mental health personally. And then also it misses the mark where it's teaching. If somebody you know is using this drug all the time and you're preaching to me how bad it is and why I shouldn't, I'm not going to be as receptive because this curriculum wasn't catered towards me. By creating a more unbiased education for marijuana, it's going to be not only more inclusive, but more effective. So that being said, similar to arguments of an abstinent sex education, we know that younger generations are already going to try drugs, most likely. We have a typical general curiosity, or maybe a little bit more younger than us, has a little bit more of a general curiosity towards life. So they're most likely going to partake. So that's why I think it's so important, or we think it's so important, that you're not just teaching the detriments, but also the benefits. You want to be able to create this atmosphere of trust and of safe practices, because as I mentioned, that there's that natural curiosity. These students are most likely going to partake. You want to make sure that they're doing so safely, because as these detriments may be relevant, you also want them to understand the positives of it. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. But that being said, when looking at the theory of EVT and how it relates to the problem, we understand that having a strong negative stigma towards marijuana can create a variety of negative expectations of the drug, its users, and other content relating to the drug. That being said, with this type of teaching that already is in place, we're creating these negative stigmas already in mind. So that way, when these individuals and these students decide to either partake, or in the real world, they are actually influenced by this drug, or they come around it, they learn that maybe their loved one or someone they admire uses marijuana, or they realize that they love marijuana or anything like that. But when they're going to experience a violation. So whether that be from them being from anything, as I mentioned, the violations valence is different for everyone, but by presenting an unbiased education, we hope to decrease the severity of the violations that one may feel when actually exposed to marijuana. And the next, an unbiased education will destigmatize the drug. This leads to less guilt in the present and future, including in medical usage, according to Hathaway, Kamal, and Erickson in 2011. I hate to ramble on, and please, if at any point you kind of want me to go back or anything like that, just tell real life Kobe and he'll rewind video Kobe and we can kind of go over this. But basically, back to the presentation. As we mentioned, this type of comprehensive studies and more unbiased type of studies will allow these students to make their own choices for themselves. So that way in the future, when it does come up, or maybe a physician, or even for like child's epilepsy, or even a future doctor for other types of maybe pain relief or any other symptoms that they feel that medical marijuana can be useful for, these people are receptive towards that, and they are open to the opportunity of the benefits that it may include, as opposed to maybe feeling some type of way about the doctor even recommending it towards them. But regardless, comparable to abstinence-based sex education, as I mentioned, comprehensive programs have favorable effects according to Santelli 2017. When considering kind of how it works in the sex ed realm, we see how a lot of schools are shifting from this abstinence-based, you shouldn't have sex, to a more comprehensive program. And in these comprehensive programs, students are able to learn how to have safe sex. They have more positive sexual encounters. They have more positive sexual relations with a more open communication about it. That being said, if we're able to do that with marijuana, it would be able to do that too. So our comprehensive program surrounding marijuana would be able to do that, because then it would allow students the opportunity to feel comfortable, maybe even talking about it to their teachers and saying, hi teacher, I would love to partake in marijuana, but I'm kind of nervous because this X, Y, and Z. to which the teacher can support them based off of the curriculum without even their own natural opinions. They can go strictly and say, well, just know you may feel this, but you can also feel X, Y, and Z also. And kind of provide that support for these students to decrease these violations that they may feel when they take it or when they're sneaking around and doing it. It'll be able to open up this communication pathway for students to involve a more healthier lifestyle with not only their own like physical health, but also their mental health and their social health.
To further go off my colleagues, we've seen all the benefits when applying EVT to the stigmatization around cannabis, but there are also a lot of limitations when applying EVT. EVT is a relatively new communication theory and hasn't been applied to a lot of modern day social issues, especially anything related to cannabis. We backed up our claims with a lot of great articles that included EVT, but there weren't anything directly correlated to the cannabis. When looking at the legalization of cannabis as well, we can see as half the country still has it as an illegal drug, and then half of the country labels it as an essential business. Stigma can be hard to correlate and happens sometimes without us realizing, and it's not a tangible object where we can just say it's true or false. EVT can happen unexpectedly, and sometimes we can't even prepare for it. Violations can be beneficial in some situations, but also not for all situations. During our last presentation, we didn't have any journal articles to back up our claims while not selecting a specific communication theory. When considering the problem of stigmatization of cannabis, we have thoroughly been able to analyze communication theories, such as expectancy violations theory, and we have also been able to identify the possible solutions to the problems of negative stigma around cannabis. This also includes the education on substance, positive commercialization of the substance, and ethnographic research performed by those with a negative perception of marijuana on those who don't. We believe that these solutions are an efficient way to combat the stigma around cannabis, especially when tied in with communication theories. We also appreciate all the feedback from our previous presentation that helped us hone in on EVT to help address the stigma around cannabis. And lastly, thank you for listening.